All right. So, Hoosier Nation, it is the end of April. Things are moving. Things are shaking in the IU men's basketball world. We'll dive into that in just a minute. But speaking of crazy news, my co-host on this podcast, Matt Lukens, since you last heard from him, has decided to move his life halfway around the world. Matt, you mentioned it on our last podcast, going to Japan. How about you give our listeners a little taste, a little background as to your big life move here over the course of the last week?
Yeah, so Nithin's not wrong. I in the course of the week got up and got on a plane and took a 13-hour plane ride, and then another 3-hour plane ride, and then another 3-hour plane ride, and I'm in Osaka, Japan, which has been fantastic so far. I really do love it over here. It's a little overwhelming because you get on what is the equivalent of a New York City metro, and everything is in kanji and not in English, so you have to kind of like turn your brain off and be like, I'm gonna match symbols with each other where I'm supposed to be going, and then everything's a maze. But the people are super nice. The food's fantastic. I think everybody would understand that one. And it's pretty cheap, honestly, comparative to the US. So yeah, I've been doing pretty well for myself. I'm like saying for food wise, like I'm getting like I get like $3 lunches. It's great.
Music to my ears. You're doing a little bit of teaching there, right? This is supposed to be in the works a year or a couple of years ago, isn't that correct?
Yeah. So I was just supposed to happen a couple years ago, and then every wave of COVID ever knocked me back. But finally, there was a little gap in time in which I could go, and so I got to go over there. But yeah, I work with preschoolers and kindergartners. So I was playing in the park with them yesterday. It was my third day of training, and it was a ton of fun. That was a lot of fun. Their kids are adorable, and they all speak English. It's the craziest thing. Like I'm like walking around, and like all the adults, like they know like 2 words of English, and I walk into my classroom, and all the preschoolers are just going at 1,000,000 miles per hour speaking English to me. I'm like, wait, I'm not ready for this, guys.
Yeah, no, I can't. I can only imagine. But the thing is, even though you're out in Osaka, that doesn't mean you're going to stop paying attention to IU basketball. And
Absolutely
the thing
not,
is,
no.
guys, look, Matt's still a part of this thing. So if he has to get up at 6 a.m. to watch us take on, McNeese State in the non-conference schedule, he's going to do it. 300 ranked team or top ranked team in the country. Doesn't matter. He is part of this now. So Matt and I were looking at the schedule. Obviously, the big news from this past week was Jordan Geronimo. We're going to dive into his return and then have a little, with draft season hitting us here in the NFL, we're each going to draft 6 players from this year's upcoming IU basketball roster to just build the best team we can build. Maybe give Mike Woodson some ideas. We're going to dive into that and so much more here on episode 252 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Thursday, April 28th, 2022, or the 29th if you're Matt, where I'm your host, Nithin Krishnan. Here, of course, as usual, is my co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, let's get started here. The one thing we have to say about Jordan Geronimo is that he really showed improvement at the end of the season. We were waiting. And then the last few games of the year, Geronimo really came forward, really splashed, especially in those games against Wyoming and St. Mary's. Even as bad as that St. Mary's game was, Geronimo impressed really more than any other Hoosier in that game. Even hit a shot in the first half to give Indiana a lead. He announced last week that he's back for the upcoming season. He's going to be a key figure in this rotation, no question about it. Matt, Geronimo was never going to leave, even after Race Thompson returned, even after Malik Renault committed. How excited should IU fans be that Jordan Geronimo is back?
Hello. Like, what do you want me to tell you? Like, if you watched Indiana basketball in the last 10 games, you should be excited about Jordan Geronimo. He was like our third best player on the court. He's better than Race at some points, and even Trayce at some points down the stretch there. Though Trayce did have some monstrous outings towards the end. Like Geronimo has elite athleticism, elite rebounding, and his shot, the more he shoots it, looks better and better every single time. And he's a guy that's like, you kind of look at it, it's like, well, what's the weaknesses in this game? Well, it's like, okay, decision making with the ball in his hands. All right, that can be fixed. What else? Like the ceiling is very high for him right now because the tools that he has at his disposal are hard to create, and the ones that he doesn't have are easy to create. So it's kind of like he's got an infinite sort of potential right now. And so bringing somebody like that back to the program is always going to be helpful.
It absolutely is. Geronimo, again, measures in at 6'6", 220. Couple of years in the books already at IU. Geronimo in the last 2 games of this past season, 15 against Wyoming, 9 points added there against St. Mary's, played 20 minutes in both of those games. No one's expecting him to rescue the program as a starter. He can just continue gaining that exposure, continue gaining that familiarity with the offense. He really stands out to me that a lot of his fellow teammates shared excitement in the news that Geronimo was returning. And so I'm looking forward to seeing Geronimo, whether it's as a starter or as a reserve, play a major role on this team. Again, Mike Woodson has made it clear, just because you're the 6th man, just because you're coming in off the bench, doesn't mean you don't play a key role on this team. So I'm curious to see what Woodson decides as far as Geronimo's role next year. Matt, talk to me about 2 different scenarios here. If Trayce Jackson returns, do you see Geronimo starting this upcoming season in the starting 5 in the lineup? And similarly, if Trayce Jackson-Davis moves on, do you think Geronimo gets his way into the starting lineup?
I think it's 75% to 25% that he does make it in, even if Trayce comes back. I think it's 100% he's in the starting lineup if Trayce leaves. You need that rebounding. I think that he brings. He's an extra shooter on the floor at all times. So you saw some videos of Trayce, if you're on Twitter the other day, trying to develop a 3-point shot. Regardless, even if he does have that sort of threat, he's only like a 25% 3-point shooter. That's great, but having somebody who looks really good doing it like Geronimo, that's much better for floor spacing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Geronimo last year finished the year 9 of 29 from 3.
Ooh, I think I just lagged out.
Oh, no worries.
No, I'm back. Okay. Yeah,
we got you back. We got you back. Yeah, it's funny. No, Geronimo last year went 9 of 29 from 3, 31%, finished the year 3 of 7 at the end of the year. So absolutely, you think about that clean shooting form. I don't think he starts regardless of whether or not Trayce Jackson-Davis returns. I'm just thinking Indiana might go with some backcourt options at the 1 and the 2, perhaps a Xavier Johnson and Jalen Hood-Schifino backcourt, along with Miller Kopp. Obviously becomes more likely that Geronimo starts if Trayce Jackson-Davis moves on. I could still see a scenario where Race Thompson gets to start, and maybe, just maybe, given how highly touted he is, I could maybe even see Malik Reneau come in as a starter ahead of Geronimo, and he can specialize as a 6th man. So,
Nithin, I think that Geronimo offers way too much, and in as far as floor spacing and rebounding goes, for him not to make it on the court starting. Because stuff like that, right? 1 3-pointer in the first 4 minutes, 2 offensive rebounds in the first 4 minutes, the first second chance points, like those kind of things literally can make or break games. So, and he's a winner. So I want Geronimo in the starting lineup.
Yeah, we'll see. No matter what, I definitely envision him getting those 25 to 30 minutes, no matter what. Can't
Yeah.
wait to see how that plays out. Again, good news, though. Geronimo could have easily put his name in the portal. He could have easily declared for the NBA draft while maintaining eligibility. He decided at the end of the day, he's going to return. He believes in the culture, buys into the coaches, buys into his teammates. Can't wait to see the impact he has in the upcoming season. Speaking of which, Geronimo's return almost, not quite, but almost solidifies IU's roster for the upcoming season. As far as we're concerned, the only decision left is what does Trayce Jackson-Davis do? And if Trayce Jackson-Davis moves on, maybe Indiana dips into the portal, grabs one player to fill out the roster, someone like Dexter Dennis out of Wichita State, who had his visit to Indiana about a couple of weeks ago. But the thing is, taking Trayce Jackson-Davis out of the equation, you've got 12 scholarship players who, for all intents and purposes, are locked and ready to go for this IU basketball team next season. So, Matt, with the NFL draft coming to us later tonight, let's do a little draft of our own. Jackson-Davis is going to be kept out of the discussion. But with the 12 remaining scholarship players from Xavier Johnson and veterans like Race Thompson, all the way to the incoming freshmen like Caleb Banks and CJ Gunn and Hood Schifino and Malik Renault, Matt and I are going to build two teams of 6 players each, no Trayce Jackson-Davis, and we're just going to try to build the best team. We'll see what kind of player combinations come through. We're going to try to build teams with complementary pieces, but it's going to be positionless. It's going to be, it doesn't have too much structure to it. Just going out, building the best group of IU basketball players we can with 6 players on each team. It's going to be a snake draft. Okay, so Matt, I'll give you the choice. Do you want the first selection in this draft or do you want the next 2?
I'll take the first selection.
All right, who do you take with the first pick in your 2022-23 IU men's basketball random fantasy draft?
I think this is the easiest first pick of all time, and this is Xavier Johnson. I mean, the guy was our starting point guard. He averages about 15 points per game down the stretch. Could completely take over games. Great defensively, honestly. I think his defense is actually underrated as part of his game. Maybe I'll work on him not getting into foul trouble as much this summer in my draft. My team will do some kumbaya training for him. But I think this is the easiest first pick ever. I mean, clearly he's our best guard and going to be one of the 3 best players on the team next year.
Yeah, that's what you would have to figure. Again, last year, Johnson, 12 points per game, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and really played his best basketball at the end of the year. Now, this is kind of a tough pick for me personally, Matt. There are a couple of guys I have in mind. And so since I do get 2 picks here, I'm going to go with Race Thompson and Jalen Hood Schifino. All right. Those are the 2 players I'm going to take. I've got a player in Race Thompson that could play versatile on the court. He could switch off on the perimeter. He could run a little pick and roll, hit that jumper and stretch the floor if needed. And as far as true point guards on this IU basketball team, it's Xavier Johnson and it's Jalen Hood Schifino. With Christian Lander out the door, committing to Western Kentucky, Rob Finney out the door, transferred to Cincinnati. Give me Hood Schifino here. I think he and Johnson are going to be steering the wheel here for Indiana at point guard this upcoming season. So with that said, Xavier Johnson, Race Thompson, Jalen Hood Schifino off the board. You get a couple more additions here, Matt. Who are you adding to your IU men's basketball fantasy team?
This has gone exactly how I planned when I got the first pick, because I want Malik Renault and I want Jordan Geronimo. I want both of them. I think if Trayce leaves, that's the starting front court at some point this year. Maybe Race is in there as well. Not maybe. Race will be in there as well. But I think depending on the matchup, they're going to rotate all 3 of those guys. But for right now for this fantasy draft. I think that's the best two that you can put together in the front court. So I'm going to take that with a point guard, and we'll see what you can come up with next, Nithin.
Man, it's giving me indigestion. Look, I do like your team. There's no question that Renault and Geronimo are gonna give me issues here. Their wingspan and with their athleticism. With the available options here, the player I'm going to select here before we dive into who won the week this past week is Tamar Bates. All right. As you can tell, I am formulating my team on 5-star prospects that we're going to be asking a lot out of this upcoming season. All right. Jalen Hood-Schifino was my second pick, and Tamar Bates was my third. And there's no question, Matt, much like we talked about with Jordan Geronimo at the start, Tamar Bates stepping up this year and being an impactful player is going to be critical for Indiana. Last year, Bates averaged 4 points a game, but he didn't play that much. 14 minutes per game. That's a number that went down in conference play. So, you want to see Bates there, improve on his field goal percentage, show that year 1 to year 2 growth. And I think a lot of Hoosier Nation is excited to see that. So we're going to take a little pause here. We've each taken 3 players on this roster. Matt, so far, his first 3 picks have been Xavier Johnson, Malik Renault, and Jordan Geronimo. My 3 picks to this point have been Race Thompson, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Tamar Bates. But let's take a quick pause here. It's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports. And I have to tip my cap to the IU softball team, who this past week decided to go out there on Andy Moore Field and sweep the Purdue Boilermakers in a doubleheader. The Hoosiers convincing in the way they handled their in-state rivals. How about victories here of 6-3, 7-4? Not exactly nail biters by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, IU this entire season has been very competitive against ranked teams. Purdue wasn't ranked, but this season the Hoosiers are 25-17, and throughout the year, whether it was Florida State at the very beginning of the season, on to interesting matchups against Northwestern and Ohio State. The Hoosiers may not have won all of those games, but they were right in it up until the end. So very good to see Indiana play this way against really competitive teams. And they really did see the results come through over this past week with victories against Purdue in that doubleheader against the Boilermakers. The Hoosiers do wrap up the home part of their slate this weekend with Illinois coming to town. A quick reminder, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for The Hoosier Sound, wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at IndianaHQ and at The Hoosier Sound. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate fans such as yourself. All right, Matt. So I've taken 3 guys here. It's still my turn as we wrap the snake around. And with my 4th round pick, this isn't easy, but I'm going to take the steady veteran presence of Miller Kopp on my basketball team. There are a few different ways I could have gone here. Could have gone with Trey Galloway. I could have gone with Anthony Leal. I could have gone with Caleb Banks or CJ Gunn, get some size with Logan Duncan. But at the end of the day, I said, give me Miller Kopp. I'm going to take his veteran presence here, whether it's on this hypothetical playground that we're going to have this basketball game on, or a potential Big Ten college basketball opponent at Assembly Hall. He can stretch the floor. He can play multiple positions. He can defend pretty much everyone except for, the Kofi Coburns of the world. So give me Miller Kopp to my team here. That's my 4th round pick. The ball's in your court now. Who do you want to select for your 4th pick and 5th pick in this IU basketball draft?
I think the 4th pick is obvious. The best available player is Trey Galloway. I got to take him, 1 for the hustle, 2 for the defense, and 3 for the hopeful praying that he develops a 3-point shot, and all of a sudden he becomes one of the 3 best players on the team. And then my 5th pick will be his buddy, and I need a 2 guard, so I'm going to go with Anthony Leal here. Shooting, teamwork, extra passing. You know, my lineup is we've got Xavier Johnson, we've got Anthony Leal, we've got Trey Galloway, we've got Jordan Geronimo, and Malik Renew. That's a really good passing five. 3, maybe even 4 shooters on the floor, depending on what Trey Galloway wants to do. And we can attack you from multiple different ways. I really like this lineup.
And I think Mike Woodson, the wheels are probably turning right now. He's saying, all right, how could we get Xavier Johnson and Anthony Leal on the court together? How does Malik Reneau impact Trey Galloway's efficiency? I think those are some of the questions that the coaching staff will have to ask this upcoming season during practice or during the preseason, because as the NBA playoffs have taught us, as this past season has taught us, with teams like St. Mary's all the way up to the champs in North Carolina, basketball is a team game still, no matter what you want to believe. It's a team game, and different combinations of players help things there. So you took Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal. That leaves 3 players left in our draft. And again, just as a refresher for the people listening, no Trayce Jackson-Davis. We're keeping him out of the question. We're looking at everyone else on this roster and drafting 6-player teams from this upcoming IU basketball roster. 3 guys left: CJ Gunn, Caleb Banks, and Logan Duncan. Now, I'm going to start by taking CJ Gunn. All right. I need my version of Anthony Leal on this team. Right? I got a lot of size. I got a lot of athleticism. Race Thompson, Jalen Hood-Schifino. I want to take the incoming freshman here. Give me CJ Gunn out of Indy. Hopefully he can stretch the floor here. I'm curious. I'm not saying he's going to end up like Victor Oladipo, not in the slightest, but I'm thinking about someone who I think the ceiling is very attractive for the IU basketball staff. Can you unlock his shooting? Can you unlock defense? Can you unlock some ball handling and distribution when he's on the court? I'm excited to see CJ Gunn's presence here. Now, with my last pick, there are 2 guys left: Caleb Banks and Logan Duncan. I'm going to take Logan Duncan, and here's why. I need some height. I need some athleticism. He's the tallest guy left on this team, right? Because we don't have someone like Michael Durr anymore. He's off to UCF. And my vision for Logan Duncan this upcoming year is not to find his way, first team all conference or anything, okay? My vision for Logan Duncan this upcoming year is to just be someone who pinch hits for Michael Durr. Step into Michael Durr's role, what he did last year. There are going to be games like last year. Michael Durr didn't play every game. There are going to be games this year where Logan Duncan doesn't play. But there might be instances where he's got to be out there for 18, 20, 22 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I want to see the height. I want to see the versatility there. Your last guy left, Matt, is Caleb Banks. Talk to Hoosier Nation a little bit about how you would like to fold him into your team.
I'm excited that this is my 6th pick, because he's somebody that could easily be a top 5 pick in this draft if things work out well for him. But again, he's a guy, he's got all the tools in the world. He's 6'8", can handle the basketball, can shoot, loves to posterize dunk people. But he's a bit rough around the edges, right? There's some things you got to work on. His lateral quickness, he's got to get stronger. He's a freshman. But this is a dude, when I'm looking at roster sort of implications as a whole for next year, not just my fantasy draft, but as a whole, I see him at worst being another body, right? Another guy that come in and give you some minutes, and that's at worst. At best, he's pushing into the starting lineup or pushing into the starting rotation there, because it's not really, I don't think IU's really going to have a starting lineup, by the way. I think it's going to be like a 7-man rotation of guys that go in and out and play the most minutes. And I think he can work his way into that as a 6'8" guy. And if he can play a bit smaller than his height, right? There's a lot of 6'8" guys come in, Race Thompson, Malik Renew, and they play a bit taller or just around that height, right? They play the 4 or the 5. If he's the type of the athleticism that we think he is, right? He can probably play a bit smaller. So we're talking, he could probably guard some 2s and some 3s, and all of a sudden that unlocks a lot of his potential. And yes, he can shoot it as well. He's got a pretty good shooting form. So the fact that I got the guy with one of the highest potentials out of all the freshmen, by the way, as the 6th pick or the last pick in the draft, I will take. So welcome Caleb Banks to the program, and welcome to my elite fantasy team.
Unbelievable. We'll wrap up with our closing thoughts here, run through the teams one more time in just a minute. But I don't know if you caught this, Matt, but there was a question in our Slack chat from Rob over the last few days that said, of all the recruits that are planning on coming in through Indiana system, starting with the class of 22 and then going through guys like Gabe Cupps in the class of 23 or Ja'Kai Newton in the class of 23. When you look at that group, right? Renault, Hood Schifino, Gunn, Banks, Cupps, Newton. Who's the one player there you're most excited to see, even looking ahead to that class of 2023 coming in?
Just excited. I think if you'd asked me this question before Renew had committed, I think I would have gone with Ja'Kai Newton. You can mark me down as a Ja'Kai Newton fan club member. President, in fact. I think he's going to be a fantastic player in IU uniform. He's just got so many tools and do so many different things. And his wingspan oh my God, it just unlocks so much for him. But I think it's Renew now, for sure. For now, it's Renew. I think, you look at somebody like Kwame Evans out of Montverde, number 2 overall recruit in his class, cut the list down to 6, and I use up on it. Montverde sounds a little familiar right now, but Renew right now, I think it is nothing, because he brings something to the program that we've already had in Trayce, but it's like another breath of fresh air, because he's freshman Trayce with a staff that's willing to develop him correctly.
Yeah,
right?
There you go, right? And so, it's not a carbon copy skill set, but it's similar. And so, you don't have to make life harder for yourself than it has to be. It takes 60-70% of what you taught Trayce Jackson-Davis and get Trayce Jackson-Davis in the locker room with Renault if Jackson-Davis chooses to return. Otherwise, get him on a Zoom call and talk to Malik and then figure out how, what sort of similarities they can share. So I totally understand where you're coming from with Renault. My answer to this question was Caleb Banks. Okay. And again, I see someone here who plays, I think, the most underrated position in basketball, right? You're talking about someone who's 6'8", but if he can show agility and if he can show that physical skill set, could he work his way into playing the small forward position? If nothing else, he can be a hybrid 3-4 out on the court. Caleb Banks can be someone who really affects the trajectory of IU basketball as soon as next year. Caleb Banks coming in, he likely won't start right away, but you see someone who can gradually get more and more playing time over the course of the year, showing that dynamic ability in that small forward or a power forward type position. That's not that low post scorer that we're so accustomed to seeing over the last few years. So Caleb Banks, interestingly enough, was the player I picked as the one I was most excited to see as far as the committed class of 22 or 23 this upcoming season. Can't wait for Jalen Hood-Schifino, obviously. A really popular answer in our chat was Gabe Cupps. All right, think about Ohio Mr. Basketball, point guard role. Xavier Johnson probably moves on after this upcoming season comes to an end. Bring in Gabe Cupps right there to really play a major role. He's going to be, according to Rob, a huge program impacting player. So again, you can choose a lot of these different options here. The good news for IU basketball fans is that there are different choices here, as far as the players you want to pick for our fantasy draft, as well as the players you're thinking about who are really intriguing prospects here in the class of 22 or 23. Looking forward to seeing how it all plays out. We're going to dive into both of our teams here in just a minute and get some final thoughts. But first, we wanted to give our social media shout out, who this week will be current Miami Heat player Victor Oladipo, who had a spectacular Game 5 for the Heat in their playoff win over the Atlanta Hawks on Tuesday night. Oladipo scored 23 points in a bit of an emergency fill-in type role. The Heat did not have Jimmy Butler. The Heat did not have Kyle Lowry, and Oladipo, who did not play the first 2 games of the series, was all of a sudden forced into 36 minutes of playing time after he had 23 minutes in game 4, I should say. Oladipo finished with 23 points in the Heat's series clinching victory, 3 steals as well, showing that defensive prowess. And he really sort of captured the attention of the entire NBA on Tuesday night, as well as the Miami Heat fans in the building. Oladipo gave some really thorough, introspective comments to NBA TV in the post-game interview. He was selected to give that interview on TV after the game had ended. And then in his post-game press conference, talking about at this point last year, he was going through multiple surgeries to figure out how to fix his lower body injuries. He was able to fight through those. And now you're seeing him on the court making a big difference for the Miami Heat, who did win their first round series against the Hawks. Man, I know you watched him. Talk to me a little bit about what you saw out of Victor Oladipo. Was it surprising to you that he played that well?
No, because he's playing that well down the stretch of the season, to the point that Heat fans were like, in the first couple games when the Heat were in close games, like, where's Oladipo? Right? like Coach Spo, what are you doing? Like, we're playing Gabe Vincent, 35 minutes game. No, nothing wrong with Gabe Vincent. I love me some Gabe Vincent, but Gabe Vincent is not Oladipo. Like, where is this? And I think Oladipo showed himself to be, well, not only more than ready, but to be absolutely capable, to be fit into the lineup. And all of a sudden, you guys need to, as NBA fans, need to watch out for the Heat, because now the Heat has a 5 of Hero, Oladipo, Butler, Lowry, and Bam Adebayo.
Yep.
Or you can take Hero out of there, and you can put in PJ Tucker. You can take PJ Tucker out of there. You can put in Duncan Robinson. Like, there's so many people the Heat can throw at you right now that I'm feeling really good about their chances of surprising some of the national NBA folks and making maybe the finals, or maybe even winning the whole damn thing at this point, because the Heat have built a monster of a roster.
We'll see what happens here. Meanwhile, the Hoosier on the Toronto Raptors, OG Anunoby, is trying to pull his Raptors out from a 0-3 deficit in the series against the Philadelphia 76ers. Game 6 just underway there. Could we potentially see Anunoby against Oladipo in the next round? Wouldn't that be fun if you are an IU basketball fan? Once again, just want to give a social media shout out to our different accounts where you can follow us and get a grasp of all the different news affecting IU sports, from men's basketball to women's basketball to soccer, baseball, you name it. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. We continue to see folks coming into our social media platforms, joining the movement. Welcome to all of you who have followed us recently. Of course, thanks to all of you who followed us from the beginning about a couple of years ago. Matt, on Instagram, we are not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
Exactly. That's where you can follow us on Instagram. There, we keep that updated, keep that refreshed here, especially if we see anything come down as far as news is concerned for the Indiana Hoosiers. All right, Matt. So let's give a quick recap. Both of our fantasy teams. You chose Xavier Johnson with the first overall pick in this IU basketball draft of players on the upcoming season's roster, excluding Trayce Jackson-Davis. We're just trying to build the best team possible to play basketball. It could be on a playground, at a park, at Assembly Hall, doesn't matter. After taking Xavier Johnson, you rounded out your team with Malik Reneau, Jordan Geronimo, Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, and Caleb Banks. My team started with Race Thompson and then filled out with Jalen Hood-Schifino, Tamar Bates, Miller Kopp, CJ Gunn, and Logan Duncan. Matt, I'll be honest with you. I think it's pretty interesting to see a steady level of talent from 1 to 6 for both of our rosters. And I think IU fans can be really excited that, look, no matter what, pretty much every group of 5 players Mike Woodson puts out to this upcoming year is going to be pretty competitive. And this doesn't even include Trayce Jackson-Davis.
Yes. I mean, this this team is deep, but lacking in certain skill sets. For instance, I still think I look at this roster and if you add Trayce to it, I go shooting question, right?
Who do you think is the best jump shooter on this team?
I don't Leal. And he shot like 30% from 3 last year. You might go Xavier Johnson based off percentages and the amount taken. But Geronimo has a good looking jump shot. It's like I'm tired of saying that guy has a good looking jump shot, and I just want to be like, wow, I love it when he makes the ball go in the basket. It's like that. Like I don't think Miller Kopp is up there either. It's like I can rattle off a list of like 7 people that can shoot the 3-pointer, but none of them I'm ever feel reliable about.
Yeah.
I just want 1 or 2 reliable shooters on the roster, and then I'm feeling really good about this team. Whether that's Leal and gets comfortable finally, and he hops in, and that's him. If it's CJ Gunn, the freshman, that can come in and do that, that's quite possible. If it's Trey Galloway, I'm going to be singing in the streets here in Japan because that unlocks so much for him. If it's Geronimo, that also unlocks so much for him. There's a lot of ifs or ands, but the good news is there's a lot of people working towards the same goal this summer. I feel like there's going to be millions of shots put up this summer in total by the entire team. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing who can rise to the top, because I think they all understand the same thing. If I can shoot and I can play defense, I'm going to play, right? Coach Winston's going to play me. So if I work my butt off this summer to develop a 3-point shot, right, and get better and be more consistent at it and have the confidence in myself that it's going to go in, I'm going to be playing 30 minutes a game next year, right? And so there's guys like I just mentioned, Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal, where they should be in the lab all summer working on that, because they can do that. Not only are they going to see themselves possibly at the next level, right? Somebody like Trey Galloway, I can totally see playing in the NBA with his skill set and his hustle. And if he hits a 3, God forbid, and his playmaking. But the same thing with Leal, right? You look at guys, he's came in touted as like the jump shooter, right? The guy that just is a knockdown 3-pointer. I'm a fan of a team that employs 2 of these dudes, right? And Max Strus for the Heat and Duncan Robinson.
Yeah,
who
Tyler Hero can knock him down too. Yeah.
But Tyler Hero could do way more than Anthony Leal could probably, because Tyler Hero is actually an athletic freak. But I'm talking like Duncan Robinson's not making an NBA team if he's not absolutely disgusting for a 3-pointer. Max Strus is not making an NBA team if he can't just make 3s like layups. Okay, so he's not making an NBA team. That's a skill set that NBA teams are always looking for, because look, there's a lot of guys that can play basketball that can't hit 3s at an appropriate rate. I think the last person I haven't mentioned here is Tamar Bates, right? Yeah. I think he's somebody that I actually feel comfortable going to next year. He's going to unlock that part of his game. Now, there's a lot of other things he needs to do first: decision making, ball handling, distribution. He needs to learn to add to his game. But I think he's maybe one of the guys I feel most comfortable that I'm like,
young
looking
player,
at his
right?
looking at his trajectory, looking what he did last year, looking at the form, the way he took the shots, his overall demeanor as the year went on. Yeah. I feel fine that like it's given a summer of film and working out and getting even more comfortable in Bloomington. Like he's going to be feeling great next year going into as far as shooting form.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting to see. I think the coaching staff has identified the same issue that you have. And it may not be a matter of bringing in someone who can knock down the three, but it might just be creating a competition to where if it's CJ Gunn or if it's Tamar Bates or if it's Caleb Banks or if it's Race Thompson or whoever, if you can knock down 38% from three, you're going to get the playing time. And I can't wait to see how that all plays out. As I can see Jalen Hood-Schifino. I mean, we don't talk about his shooting all that much as a key factor here, but if he can take some uncontested three-point jumpers during, real-time basketball games, as part of as a fourth or fifth scoring option on this IU team on the court, compared to being the primary ball handler in the backcourt at Montverde, you might see some things open up for him as well. So really excited to see how all that plays out. Hey, if you are looking at our teams and want to pull your hair out and yell at us over the guys that we picked, make sure to mention us on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound or at Indiana HQ. Maybe leave a comment here on the YouTube comment section. We did have a live video this week, but we're absolutely going to upload this to YouTube. Let us know in the comment section what you think, because I can't wait to see when we look back on this episode in February or March coming up, how ridiculous some of these picks were. So as we wrap up, Matt, here on this Thursday night / Friday morning, depending on where you are in this world, do you have any final thoughts here? Any closing thoughts? Jordan Geronimo is back. Indiana basketball trending in the right direction here. There is potentially a roster spot to fill based on Trayce Jackson-Davis's decision in a month. You also have the NFL draft coming up where a couple of Hoosiers could very well be selected. Any final thoughts over on your end?
I think final closing bell here. This roster looks fun. Yeah. It does. Yeah. I really like the way that they've constructed the staff. Minus the whole who the heck's going to shoot the ball. And if they actually believe in themselves, I think that's fine. And it makes a lot of sense why this is the roster, because there's a lot of guys on here that's like, yeah, if this guy develops a 3-point shot, but like we're winning the Big Ten, right? Like, and if you have the confidence that I think the coaches do in themselves as player developers and as coaches, like you should be absolutely confident that you're going to be able to develop those guys and unlock them and unlock their potential. We saw that with Geronimo last year a little bit towards the end. We saw that with Xavier Johnson towards the end last year. We need another 2 guys like that this year. That's not those 2 guys. As much as I want to see them to also take more steps forward, right? That would be great for the program. We got to have add some other guys to the fold. Maybe it's Trayce Jackson-Davis, right? Maybe Trayce comes back and he can shoot. All of a sudden, who cares if Trey Galloway can't shoot? Because then, that lineup that we had at the end of games, right? You had Xavier Johnson, you had Trey Galloway, you had Rob Finney, which will be taken over by Jalen Hood-Schifino, and you had Race and Trayce out there on the floor, or Geronimo you could put in for Race or whatever. But all of a sudden, all of those lineups have 4 shooters, and the only one that doesn't shoot is Trey Galloway, right? So that's looking a lot better to me for as far as as floor spacing goes and offense. But defensively, this team is going to be outstanding from game one. There's every position defends at a high level. There's not a single person I think I can pick out on the roster that, to me, other than the freshmen, that I'd be like, yeah, the team's going to zero in on taking him off the dribble, right? Like, I don't know what CJ Gunn offers defensively, so I can't say that. But even the 5-star freshmen, they're not going to do that, right? Jalen Hood-Schifino is a high-level defender. Malik Renew is a really high-level defender. Like, both of them are going to come in at day one and be able to play in Mike Woodson's defensive system. So I'm super excited to see where this roster goes and how it unfolds. I'm a little terrified about what happens if Trayce doesn't come back, but I'm betting a lot of my hope and just as far as my logic goes, I'm betting on that he comes back. So
We'll see. Yeah, Trayce Jackson-Davis does not have to announce anything really for another month. If he wants to, he can, but that kind of conclusive deadline is the first couple of days in June when he has to announce his return back to Indiana or his departure, or I guess remaining, keeping his name in the NBA draft process. For me, switching gears to the football side of things, really excited to see which Hoosiers get their name announced this weekend. I would expect any Indiana player to go on Saturday on day 3, but Indiana is going into this NFL draft with a streak of 8 straight years where at least one player has been drafted. Last year was Tamar Johnson by the Denver Broncos. I could very well see Micah McFadden, Ty Freifogel, and Peyton Hendershot get their names announced. What happens to Ryder Anderson? What happens to Stephen Carr if not drafted? Perhaps as an undrafted free agent. Of course, those players always make some noise over the course of the season. So excited to see the Hoosiers' hard work on the football field over the last few years pay off here this weekend and add it to the list of pro Hoosiers in the NFL making a difference. But folks, that about wraps it up for a 252nd episode of the Hoosier Sound. We thank you so much for joining us to hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today. Be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.